So I wanted to welcome you all to this. I don't know if we can call it a lunch and learn. I don't see anybody on here who's actually eating lunch. Um, okay, Jen's faking it, and Sherry's got some water. Oh, hang on. Dr. David's chewing on something. Great. So he's maintaining the spirit.
I'll get some green water.
All right. Yeah, I saw you when you brought that in. That looks a little weird.
Chlorophyll.
Okay, well.
Internal deodorant.
I'm sure we could all use some of that. Anyway, I wanted to welcome you all to this Lunch and Learn. This is a weird event during some weird times. I like it. We'll see how well this works, and hopefully this is going to be a worthwhile event for everybody to participate in, spend your time on. I appreciate you all being here. The reason that we're doing these events, I know several of you have been to a couple of the ones we've had in the past. And we firmly believe that we can be better at what we do. We can be better by just improving marginally every day. And we want to associate ourselves with other people who have the same goal, to improve the way we perform so that we can improve the outcomes that we produce for our clients. And the chiropractors on this call, we all serve the same client base in many cases. We, of course, serve them from the legal side, but I honestly can't think of very many clients of ours, personal injury clients of ours, who don't have chiropractors. And the chiropractor plays such an important role in the treatment plan for a personal injury patient, primarily because the chiropractors are just able to spend more time and more care than a lot of the other doctors who get involved in client care. You're not likely to have a neurosurgeon or a very expensive medical specialist who's going to be able to give the time and attention necessary to uncover all of the issues related to a client's injuries. We see this time and again. Someone goes in for treatment with a specialist, and that specialist is just treating the issue that's been brought to them, that's been kind of circled with red ink. So this is what we want you to look at. And we'll have clients who go in and get treated by specialists, and they walk out with a variety of issues that never got diagnosed, never got treated. But with chiropractors, you guys do a phenomenal job of seeing the big picture and helping take care of everything that's going on with our clients, not just the specific issue that might have been the cause for a referral in the first place. So today we've got Dr. Joe Martini, who's going to be our presenter on the topic. We called it Put Me In, Coach. The chiropractor is the quarterback of the personal injury team. That really is a role that a chiropractor can fill terrifically. And Dr. Joe has a tremendous amount of experience in chiropractic in general and personal injury work in particular. And so he's going to share with us his views on how the chiropractor can help benefit the personal injury process and benefit the patients and the clients who are involved in personal injury cases, not just by performing chiropractic services, but also by acting as the quarterback for the team. So take it away, Dr. Joe.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Ken and Jen for putting on this webinar. This is my first webinar myself, so it's a very interesting process. I just wanted to give you a quick history of myself. I've been in practice 30 plus years, and up until about 3 years ago, the personal injury cases that I did do were the ones that kind of came in to see me, existing patients. They walked in, got a referral here and there. And then a couple of years ago, I had to change my philosophy and become, I would just call, more aggressive. And that's actually how I came to Ken's office at Piedmont Law. I was literally just going around and introducing myself to attorneys in the area with about a 1 to 7 mile distance from where I was. And I just literally came in. This is one of the few offices where I actually came in, knocked on the door, introduced myself, and Ken sat me down for a few minutes and said, "Hey, well, tell me what's going on." And since then, I've probably visited 30, 40, 50 offices, and about 20%, maybe 10, 12 offices actually had the lawyers sit and talk with me. And those are the ones that I started to refer patients to. And all of a sudden, the energy was there. I put the energy out, the energy came back. So basically, that face-to-face contact makes sense to me. Oh, there's the attorney. I didn't know him personally. We've met. I know Dr. Barnett is on the call also, or on the webinar, and his meet and greets are fantastic, but they get to be a couple hundred people, and sometimes we don't get to meet as many people, or it's too crowded, or it's just too many people. So you want to have that face-to-face with the lawyers, with the attorneys, with the office managers, or whoever's even going to be handling the case. When in the beginning I was a smaller office, I had maybe better attention to detail, but now, maybe as some of you know, at the first of the year, I joined forces with Health Plus Wellness Centers and Dr. Joe Esposito, and now I have it's better for me because of the electronic health records and the attention to detail, and the record keeping is probably as important as anything else. So again, establishing that relationship with the attorney. What happens when, my thing is, what happens when the patient first walks into the office? There's three ways typically a patient will walk into your office. The first one is they'll have a referral from somebody you've already worked with, and that's great. You've already got the referral, you got the relationship. Another one might be where somebody walks in and they're in an accident, you don't know who they are, and they're like, I was in an accident and I need help, and what do I do? And I need an attorney. And then there's where you can go and just, oh, good. All right, well, I've got a couple of attorneys here that I can possibly refer you to. And what I have tried to do over the years, as I've built up the network of attorneys that I've worked with in law firms, is I try to match the prospective patient with the attorney that I think would best fit their personality. And I explained that to them. And that's how I kind of came up across with that word, being the quarterback. So anyway, so you got the person that comes in that's already got an attorney, great. You got the person who comes in who needs an attorney. You have an existing patient maybe who needs an attorney. And then the third one is, or fourth one is, somebody who comes in who doesn't want to use an attorney. That's always tough. Like, well, I don't want to use an attorney. And you got to go through why. And then you might realize you might have some issues. Well, I don't want to pay the percentage, or I don't think I need an attorney, or my friend's going to help me. And you know what's going to happen on that one. So you have a choice. What we have done is, first thing we'll ask is, if you don't want an attorney, just find out, do you have a police report, that sort of thing, who's liable, make sure they're not the at-fault party, because you don't want to get 3 weeks into care and you find out, guess what, it's a 50-50 case, or they might be at fault. But then if they don't want to use an attorney, you ask about med pay. You always ask about med pay anyway. And if they don't want to use an attorney and they don't have med pay, what are your choices? You can roll the dice, and you know how that might turn out, or you can just ask the patient, well, if you don't want to use an attorney, that's fine, but here's our fees, and you can pay this each time up front. And they look at you like you're crazy. Well, the insurance company said they'll pay for my bills. And then you try to have to explain to them how that'll work. So what we try to do, or the other, I forgot the other possibilities. They come in with an attorney that you really would rather not work with. That, we all have those attorneys that we've either gotten screwed on the back end of it, or they're just not one of the attorneys you want to work with. So what do? You have to make that decision pretty much the first or second visit. You don't want to start getting into care and realize that this is not going to work for you. So those are the decisions you have to make. I prefer to at least get them, call up an attorney, say, hey, will you work with this person? And if they don't want to work with an attorney, you hate to lose a patient. So it's a decision you're going to have to make. If it is a new attorney and they have a new attorney and you're like, great, and you really don't know them, you do two things. One, you immediately call them and say, hey, I have Miss Jones here, and she was in an accident. She's referred either by you or she lives close by, and introduce yourself. Let them know, hey, I'm here. This is how much experience I have. This is what I like to do. Here's how we do things here. How do you like to do things? And again, that's when we give them the line of, I like to be the quarterback, and let the attorneys be the head coach, the general manager, whoever. You like to call the shots, old school as the quarterback, call most of the plays, but you're going to have to refer to the attorney's office, when things get down the road, as far as, referrals for MRIs, pain management, orthopedists, whatever. The attorney has to be involved with that, because in my opinion, the attorneys are the ones that are paying the bills at the end. So you want to work with the people that the attorneys feel obviously comfortable with too. Or maybe you don't have somebody and the attorney's like, look, I know a shoulder guy. This patient has a shoulder issue. Yeah, let's get the patient over there to get the shoulder looked at. And if you didn't have that referral, you're looking like the star with the patient. That's the thing. So again, if you get the new attorney, you want to call that attorney, make the introduction, tell them how things work. Ask also, if it's a couple days old, if they've gotten a police report. That's the other thing too. You don't want to get involved too much if there's if you don't have a police report, or you want to make sure that there's a liability factor there and you're not spinning your wheels. So that's the first thing you really need to do. And then let that patient know, especially if you already know the attorney. What I do is I literally get my cell phone out and say, here's the attorney I want you to use, or these two attorneys you pick, and this is why I want you to use these attorneys. And I have them on my speaker, on my cell phone. So if there's an issue with the patient's like, look, the attorney didn't call me back or something happened, you're going to call that attorney. You can call the attorney right in front of the patient. Say, hey, what's going on here, so that we can nip anything in the beginning that may be an issue. So that's how we at least start. Anybody have any questions about that? Ken, do you have any input?
No, not at the moment, but I did just send a text to everybody. If you have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat feature, and we'll either address them as we go, or at least get to them all at the end of the presentation. Okay.
Well, how about this then? Let's go to the first visit. Say everything is okay. We have an attorney that you know, or you like, or you're going to work with, even before that. But when you're doing your first visit, that first visit is going to build a rapport with the patient. The very first visit, they come in, they see your office, the paperwork's fairly manageable, but it's important to go back to the basics of the history. And we forget a lot of times, we know as docs, the OPQ or ST. We go through it, how long, when did the accident happen, what's better, what's worse. But it's really important, for one, the first thing is, has anybody else been in the car with you? A lot of times they forget, was anybody else hurt? I have my 3-year-old in the back, they're okay. Yes, maybe, maybe not. I've taken care of a lot of kids, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, maybe not as severe. You have to ask the parent, has their behavior been different? A lot of times it's just more of an irritable issue with a 3 or 4-year-old, but there are other people sometimes in the car, and you have to ask that question too. The other thing is not just the basic neck pain, headaches, low back pain, radiating pain, any type of possible brain trauma, memory issues, dizziness, lightheadedness, ears ringing, sensitivity to light, fatigue. These are diagnoses too. Docs, these are coded diagnoses that need to go in your diagnosis. You got plenty of space to put all these different diagnoses, and those are what you need to actually help, for lack of a better word, build the case. You need the right codes, and you need to document it. That's, again, the documentation. I think we've all gotten better at it. I would be honest to say that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, the documentation, we were probably a little bit lax. But now with the electronic healthcare records, there's really no excuse to not put every single thing down that the patient complains of, and ask them each time they come in. So that's the basics. But the insurance drivers, those diagnosis codes, and then the tests and the other diagnostic testing would help build the case for the attorneys to help get the best fair settlement for the patients. And that's the bottom line is, we want to take care of these patients, and we want to have that nice little relationship, attorney, chiro, patient, and any other referrals that go out there. So, and also the other thing is too, sometimes a patient will call in, and I was in an accident last week, and you're like, well, you want to get him in there ASAP. Well, I'm going to come next Friday. I'm kind of busy. So they can't be if they're in an accident, they need to be in within, 7 to 10 days is my recommendation. I don't really like to go have somebody come walking in 14 days later telling me they got in a car accident and they're hurting. I mean, of course, sometimes there are injuries that don't show up initially, and that's another thing that you have to do. Again, in your notes, patients came in on this date, stated that they didn't have really any pain until the next day, and the pain got worse. They thought it was going to be, this all needs to be in the history, and you need to write it all down. So, and again, we'll go back to after that first visit, you call the lawyer up. You say, hey, thanks for the referral, or here's the referral, and here's the patient, and these are the findings we got, and here's how we're going to start handling it, because you want to be on top of it. You want to have the relationship. Whoop, what did I do there? I just knocked myself off. Can you still hear me? All right, well,
yeah, we can hear you.
All right, can you see me?
Yeah.
Well, I just knocked myself off. That's okay. I can still talk without looking in the so then maybe after the first visit, a week anyway, you can, hopefully the attorney winds up getting some information about the insurance company. That's important too. Limits of liability. Is it a little bit better case? Is it, maybe it's not as good a case, so that you need to know how you can treat the patient as far as the limits of liability. And, I've had attorneys go, you can be aggressive on this case, or, you can be a little bit more aggressive, or you need to be conservative because there's only X amount of dollars that's going to be able to go around. So it's kind of good to know that early on. The next thing is if patients are still having pain and, getting an MRI. When do you refer out for an MRI? I prefer to do after, at the most 2 weeks, 7, 8, 9 visits. If the patient is still presenting with some issues and it's like, well, my neck's better, but my low back's bothering me, my headaches seem to be improving. All right, well, we have a low back issue, and let's again call the attorney, be the quarterback, call the attorney. I want to send out for an MRI. Who do you like to use? Or sometimes the attorney's like, well, whoever you like to use. Okay, fine. Get that referral out. Within 3 weeks is important. You'll get the results back hopefully in a day or two. There's some obvious pathology on those MRIs. There's a disc bulge. There's all kinds of other things that may even be involved that you weren't even thinking about. And again, so what's the next step? Is it a pain management case? Yes. Well, then that's the next step. It seems to be the progressive, normal, logical step is for some pain management options. Sometimes the patient's like, well, what does that mean? Am I going to get a shot? Well, we don't know yet. Again, we're going to refer back to the attorney. Is there a specific pain management clinic you like, a doctor you like? Like Ken was saying in the beginning, we're the ones as chiros that get all the face time. You're going to see a patient 18, 20, 22, 24, maybe 30 times over the course of a couple of months. You're going to be spending 8, 10, 15 minutes with them each time. So we're the ones that, have the rapport where when they do go to the specialist, they might get a 10-minute consult and, treatment, and they don't really see those docs that much. So they got to trust you. And when you tell them that these are the doctors that are going to be the right doctors for you to at least get choices for pain management, that works out great too. So even if there's no positive MRI findings, if they're still having pain, you could do one of two things. You could maybe readdress the MRI and talk to the radiologist and say, hey, Miss Jones here is still presenting with a lot of issues, and you're basically saying the MRI is clear. So there's got to be something going on. So I'm not telling them how to do their job, but sometimes they can maybe reevaluate the MRI. But this also lets the patient know that you have their best interests at heart, and you are really working with them to make sure they have the best possible outcome. And brag on yourself a little bit. Tell them that hey, we're doing everything we can to assure you that we're treating you right, you're getting the right results, and then on the back end, your law office, your attorney's office is going to be able to get the best possible outcome for you as far as a settlement is concerned. Also, most attorneys don't really have a problem where we're going to send for the MRI or even for pain management, but I always like to ask first. The other thing is trying to get a relationship with the MDs, not just the pain management guys, but the orthos, and that's really helped with Dr. Barnett with all these meetings and meet and greets that he has put on for years now. Is you get to meet different docs from and they're the ones a lot of times that are holding these parties, or if you will. And so you get to see their facilities, and that's good on the back end too, because then you can tell the patient, hey, I've been to this office. They're professional. It's a great office. And then have the docs come to your office too. Same thing with the attorneys. Invite them to your office. Invite them to lunch once we get through all this stuff. Have them come tour your facility, see what your office looks like, because that's important too. So the more you can develop the relationship with the MDs, just like the lawyers. And also the other thing is to say you have an attorney that that you're not sure of. We all have other friends and other chiros. You call them, hey, have you ever worked with this particular attorney? If they've been okay, if they treated you fair, that's another thing another little tidbit of information. But let's see. Always keep the attorney's office in the loop. I go to other offices and it's like, oh, well, we haven't heard from the chiropractor in a month. We don't even know if the patient's still treating. Don't let that happen. Call every couple of weeks or just every 2 weeks. And the other thing is if the patient, this is more so in the beginning, I'm kind of backtracking. All of a sudden the patient comes in 2, 3 times, 4 times, and all of a sudden they miss an appointment. They can't get them in. You need to get on the phone with the attorney and let the attorney, again, try to get in touch with them ASAP and say, look, this is very important that we have continuity. Yeah, that's the word, right? Continuity of treatment, because the insurance companies see these gaps and they'll pounce right on it. So communication on both sides is important. Let the patients know you have their best interest, and a lot of it is just common sense. So that's my take on that. The other thing is you have to be willing to work with the attorneys on the back end with the billing. I've talked to other chiros. I don't want to do personal injury. I'm always getting my bills cut. Look, this is the world of personal injury. Not all cases are the same. Be a little wary maybe of the patient who comes in on the third visit and goes, hey doc, how much do you think my case is worth? That's another one. It's like, well, you see the front door says doctor or DC. It doesn't say attorney. So again, let the attorney know, hey, look, this patient's already asking about a settlement, and we're week 2 into our treatment. So that's just something you might want to be aware of on the back end. So I think that's kind of most of the ideas that I have. I'm doing this for 30 plus years and doing it more aggressively, for sure in the last 2 to 3 years. Anything else?
Well, yeah, I know we want to address a couple of the questions that are coming over the chat, but my synopsis of what you just said basically is the best thing a chiropractor can do to help fulfill that role as the quarterback of the team is you always take a thorough, very detailed history, and you follow up on the elements of that history at every visit, so you keep track of all of the ailments that a person might be having, whether or not they're things that you're treating them for directly.
Right. Yeah.
You're the one who's making the referrals. You're sending them out for the imaging. I think you had said that within a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, you should be set.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 to 6 visits, hopefully 6, 7 visits. That would be my suggestion.
Getting them out to pain management, and you're managing those referrals. I think you mentioned at one point, I don't recall you following that thread all the way, but the head injury, which we've seen a lot of this in car wrecks. We see a lot of it in the past, at least. We've seen a lot of it being overlooked, where the patient comes in and says, yeah, they have a headache, they were dizzy, they had blurred vision, they had light sensitivity, and there was just never a formal evaluation for concussion and any additional.
Where the other one is they just feel off. I'm off. I'm just not right, and they know their bodies, and again, I'm off. Well, then we need to maybe get out and get an evaluation with a neurologist or a neuro, and again, we come back to the lawyer. Who do you like to work with? Or, hey, we've worked with this particular doc in the past. At least get an evaluation.
Right, and then making sure that they get the imaging that.
Yes.
And again, thorough imaging that's covering all the areas where they have problems or potentially have problems. There's a question that came in over the chat. I don't know if you see it, but the question was, where do you recommend chiropractors go for x-rays in particular, and other imaging, if they don't have an x-ray in their office?
Well, we've used American Health Imaging. They have offices all around town. Elite has offices, and they've really worked with us as chiros to get those reports back to us quick. They really like working with chiropractors now, and they're, so those are the two that our office has used.
Okay.
And they have offices all around town, so.
Yeah, we work with those guys too. I know that AHI doesn't have x-rays at most of their facilities. They have a lot of CTs and MRI machines, but x-rays seem to be harder to find with them. But there was a question that Sherry wrote. Are there any codes that you'd rather chiropractors not use? Is that sure?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Well, the question was, I guess it was actually addressed to me. Are there any codes that you would rather chiropractors not use? I'm not, kind of like I'm going to echo what Dr. Martini said. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job because I don't know how to do your job as well as you do. So I want the evaluations to be thorough, and I want them to be accurate. As far as what codes you use versus not using, I mean, I would much rather see, for example, I'd much rather see a cervical sprain diagnosis than a cervical segmental dysfunction diagnosis.
Yeah, the S codes. The S codes are what you really need to use as far as that. They're, the sprain strain. I've been to enough seminars where they say, well, you use the sprain codes, but then there's also a strain code, so you can have both. And the radiculopathy codes, the ligament laxity code. If you're taking cervical Davis 7 series, you can see if there's ligament laxity on there. And that'll, again, help build the case. They're drivers. That's what the insurance companies, unfortunately, they just have a lot of them just have, a book about these are the diagnoses that are worth more. These are the diagnoses that are not worth as much. The segmental, the M99, 01, 02, 03, those probably aren't really necessary. You want to have the sprain strain codes. If there's any kind of radiating pain, the headaches, the G code, I think it's G44319. I'm not sure if that's the exact code. I'd have to look that up. But and again, if it's fatigue, light issues, memory issues, these are codes that you can look up. They're F codes and G codes, I believe. So if you have your Chiro ICD-10 code books, they're in there. Or you can even you can literally Google it and it'll come up with the code. So
yeah, ultimately, I want everything that's in there to be accurate, to be supported by your evaluation of the patient. I would never encourage anybody to stretch the truth or put a diagnosis in there just to help the personal injury case. But at the same time, I want it to be thorough, and anything that could potentially be valuable to the claim, it needs to be in the records. That's just how you get the best outcome for the client.
Would you say not to have M99 codes at all? Like, you don't think we should be putting them in there? I've just heard differing.
No, that's I don't know. Maybe Dr. Martini has that.
I've just heard differing opinions on that. In that,
yeah, I mean, Doc, you can put it in. I just don't put it in on the PI cases.
You don't?
No.
It doesn't bother me. It's just when I'm listing the codes that are that came out of the medical records, that kind of code is always kind of it's at the tail end. It's never going to be the code that I list first and talk about first. It's just kind of this is also there. Because it's that kind of segmental dysfunction code is not really driving any value, whereas a strain or sprain, that has permanency implications, and it also could potentially be it's connected obviously with ligament laxity and potentially connected to an impairment rating. But that's a question that occurred. I don't know how many people on here are comfortable with and qualified with and trained in generating impairment ratings. Either impairment rating for a body part or whole body impairment. Is that part of your routine?
Not mine personally. I am not, I don't have the training to actually, never did there's supposed to be a specific courses and, probably a 30-hour continuing education course to be a certified impairment rating person. I mean, there's probably docs out there that actually just do that. That's all they do. I don't know any of them personally.
So that would probably be something that would benefit all of us and benefit all of our patients and clients to do, is to develop those relationships where, you get to the end of the treatment plan, the client's at MMI, but they're not 100% recovered, to know where we're then going to send them for that impairment rating. To kind of put a bow on the whole documentation and get it ready for presentation to the insurance company or presentation.
Well, maybe some of the other docs that are on this have somebody that they know. I don't know anybody personally.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if Steve doesn't have a role in it. But anybody else routinely or even just on occasion send patients out for an impairment rating? And if so, where? I can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. See.
Ken, this is Steve. Can I answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, Joe, you're doing a great job. I thought you were just a pretty face, but you're doing a great job with the seminar. On the X-ray, one thing that a lot of us don't realize is these insurance companies, when the claims come in, everything goes in their software. So if there's no hospital entity, if your patient didn't go to an emergency room, or your patient not seen a medical provider and you're the first port of contact, and you don't have an x-ray machine, you can utilize an outpatient imaging center at a hospital. So the patients don't have to go into the emergency room. The outpatient imaging center in a hospital is empty for the most part. Patients can go in there with a chiropractic order and have their x-rays taken. If they're insured, or if it's not very expensive to shoot a few films, the hospitals really don't charge a lot of money for x-rays. It generates a report. And when the adjusters get that report, they don't know that hospitals have an outpatient imaging center. They just see that the patient went to the hospital. So that adds a lot of value to the claim. When I was in practice, the last 10 years that I was in practice, even though I had an x-ray machine, if it was an MVC, I didn't x-ray the patients. I sent them directly to the outpatient imaging center at the hospital. The radiologists review it, and then, of course, you get a report back, and then you get the films. And the next thing with regard to impairment rating is a lot of chiropractors in Georgia are certified by the American, by several boards to do impairment ratings. Chris Conley is great in Stone Mountain. He'll do them, but some companies won't accept an impairment rating regardless of the certification of the chiropractor. So we send those to Dr. Malin Potty at Regional Medical Group. He's a medical provider who also is an attorney. And we also send him to Jonathan Newton in Marietta. And both those doctors are certified in medical impairment ratings. And those are two good resources for you.
Great.
But a hospital imaging center is something that most chiropractors don't know about and don't utilize. It's fairly underserviced, so that if you want more information at a later date, you can call me on that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Can I ask a question real quick? You guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So we sent a client out to I'm on in Marietta, East Cobb, and we sent the person out to I think it was Northside, has a medical imaging center right from my office now. When they did we called them up and said, we're chiropractors, we want the x-rays, weight bearing, things like that, just kind of how we wanted it done. They didn't do any of that. And the report on it in itself was like, everything's fine, everything's normal. It literally said on it, there's no subluxation. Meanwhile, you look at something like the x-ray of the neck, the lateral cervical, and you see there's obviously, misalignment, loss of curve, all kinds of things. We also try to send some of our patients to Life University because they're real close. And I get a really nice chiropractic report with it, but it's really hard to work with them as far as the hours and things like that. They're inexpensive, but I'm not sure if they take insurance. Is there anywhere else available, like a hospital type setting, that would give us that, the patient went to the hospital to get x-rays, but then we can actually get a report or an x-ray that, driving the case rather than taken away from it like it did in our case, where, the pathologist was just basically, nothing's wrong with this patient.
All there, David, can you hear me?
Yes.
So this is Steve. All they're evaluating in the hospital is for recent fracture or active osseous pathology. So they're not reading, those films for structure. So what physicians do, medical providers in any space, is they send patients out, like at Polaris Spine and Neurosurgery. We do an MRI. We send that MRI to a licensed radiologist, simply because we want to make sure there's nothing in the soft tissue that is suspect. So it's called, a read. We do the overread, which means that we do the structural read on that MRI. So it's very common in healthcare for a facility and a radiologist to go ahead and report one set of findings, and the actual specialist to report another set of findings. So it doesn't hurt you if a radiologist says there's no subluxations or he can't find anything on the film. Of course, at Emory, in Decatur, where I work, those radiologists know that they're reading for chiropractors. So they're going to talk about the reversal of the cervical curve. They're going to talk about, anything that would be helpful to a chiropractor, but Northside won't, because they're not schooled in that. And, if you want to have your patients ride up to Emory and Decatur, you're going to get a different report. But I wouldn't let the x-ray report stand in your way. The most important thing is the banner, the fact that the patient went to the hospital, because that's definitely reimbursable when somebody goes ahead and evaluates the claims.
Okay.
They don't know the difference between an emergency room and an outpatient imaging center. They just see a hospital bill.
Just to piggyback on that too, a lot of times patients will come in with their films from the x-ray and the report, just like Doc said, and it's like, well, it says my x-rays are normal. And I say, well, they're looking, again, for fractures. So no, they're not normal from our viewpoint. And they want to just rule out that there's not a break. So yes, you're okay. There's no fractures, great. But yes, then you can show the patient we got problems.
Well, let me just jump in, because that's what I do best. Right, Joe? So we had a patient yesterday, a chiropractor called me. One of his friends and neighbors got pulled down to the ground by her dog. Saw another dog, the dog was big, she was little. She went to the ground. She was in a tremendous amount of pain. They called me at 4:15 in the afternoon. Everybody at Polaris Spine and Neurosurgery was gone. By the way he explained it, it sounded like a fracture. So they lived in Cherokee, so the patient wound up going to Northside Cherokee. And I said, if she needs any assistance in the morning, call me. The doctor's getting in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'll make sure she'll be seen. So they did, in the emergency room, an MRI and a CT scan on this patient. And I spoke to the patient's husband this morning, and she was released from the ED. They said her films were normal. Okay, so they did a CT and an MRI. And then, since Polaris is on that system, the patient called me. We got her scheduled an appointment this morning. They pulled up the MRI and read it, and she's got a huge herniated disc at L5-S1. So she was released from the emergency room with a clean bill of health last night, and Polaris took a look at that MRI and said it's far from normal. She needs to come in. So there you go. I think, David, that might answer your question.
So even if they have, what happened with our patient was everything was taken laying down in the recumbent position. Even if they have all that stuff, we just basically grab it and send it to another like back bar or a pathologist or somebody to read over it and give you a different look at it.
You can either do the overread, or you could send it out to Dar McGowan or somebody else at American Health Imaging once you have the films, and they'll read it totally different than the radiologist read it, when he did his report. So Ken, can I picture you in your office there? I'm talking, so my number's on the screen, but can I see you on the screen for a second? Can you hear me?
You should be.
Okay, so if I was to ask everybody in this room, what did you just see? And they say, I saw Ken, in front of this computer. Okay, well, everybody in this room would say, yes, that's true. But what I see is, I see Ken. I see that Ken grew a beard since the last time I saw him. I see diplomas in the background in his office. I see that he's wearing a plaid shirt. Did I misstate anything? No. I think everything I said was accurate. But some of the people in this room would just say, I saw Ken sitting in front of his computer. So that's what a radiologist in a hospital would say. I see Ken sitting in front of his computer. They're not going to talk about his glasses. They're not going to talk about the pictures in the background, even though it's all accurate. They just didn't think it was important. Right. So that's why, the read by the radiologist in the hospital is not everything. That's why we overread them as practitioners, to go ahead and put our spin on what that x-ray says. Okay.
what I, just to chime in too, what I also like with Elite and with AHI is when they do the MRI reports, they always write, indicative of a recent trauma. So it shows it right on there. Even I just had a 22-year-old young lady, low back issue and right hip issue, and everything else was doing well as far as her treatment, but she was still having this nagging right hip, and it wound up being an L4 thing, and explained right on there at AHI, and DAR did the report, and it's like indicative of a recent, most likely indicative of a recent trauma. My X-ray didn't show anything, so there you go. I mean, they're trained that way, at least especially for the MRIs. So having that wording in there does help, I would believe, on the back end with cases.
Yeah, when you're ordering those MRIs, how much instruction do you typically give the MRI facility on how exactly you want them to perform the MRIs in terms of slice width and angling and all that? Are you specific about that, or you just work with facilities that know what they're doing and know what to do for?
Well, the forms you fill out, it just says lumbar, or brain or neck or shoulder. We just just say lumbar. And most likely, we don't get into exactly how they have to. They know how to take the MRIs. They know how to do them. I don't know, about the slices and the MAC. We just trust that these MRI companies, especially the ones we've worked with for years now, and that give quick, accurate turnaround and great reports. We just trust that they're going to do what they need to do.
I was wondering if you've ever had any problems with that, though. Where they're going in and doing like 4 millimeter slices, cervical spine, and potentially missing things.
I've never come across that. No.
Well, AHI does a specific SWI if you have a brain scan. So if you need especially if someone has concussion symptoms, you can order the SWI scan, and it'll do micro slices to get you a more in-depth look. You just have to write with SWI on the paper.
Okay, very good.
So has anyone dealt with a patient who's having libido or sexual dysfunction issues as a result of personal injury? And what can you share about how you can treat that?
I've probably in the past have put that down. I can't remember what exact code it is, but again, that's something that you need to ask the patient. Or sometimes you forget, and the patient will actually tell you, especially a male with a male. Probably a female patient might not be upfront with you that way, and even a lot of the male patients. So I just can't have relationships with my wife. It's you need to put it down. I'm not exactly sure of the code, but I'm sure there is a code.
Would you do anything for like a referral to somebody? Do you have anybody that you would talk to about that? I mean, obviously, if it's like a musculoskeletal issue, you're going to be taking care of that and everything as a chiropractor. But if it's something different, or more related to libido and things like that, is there anybody that you guys would refer to or try to encourage them to speak to about it?
I don't have anybody in my wheelhouse, and maybe Dr. Barnett does.
I do. So I send patients to Advanced Urology. They have multiple locations throughout the Atlanta area. So if you have a patient that has they have their own urology ASC. So if you have a patient with that need, let me know. Get in touch with Ken, or you see my number up on the screen. That's my cell phone number. Let me know, and I'll get patients to them. They work using a funding company. So anything that you need, we have neuropsychologists, urologists, dentists. Most of them work on lean. Some insist on funding companies. We have plastic surgeons for scar revisions, ruptured breast implants, broken noses, facial injuries. Anything that you need, we even have a vet that works on a lean. We had a case where a service dog got injured. So first time I thought somebody was playing a practical joke on me, but after that, we've had a few of those.
tabs. Craig, how are you doing? You came in fairly recently. Can you hear me? It's not moving. I think he's frozen.
Is he muted?
That's not actually him. That's just a picture. Nobody could hold still for that long. So
How do you know if it's Cliff or Craig?
his name says Craig. Anyway, so does anyone have any more questions for Dr. Martini or for me or for anybody? You guys working on anything interesting?
I've had a couple different. I'm still pretty new to doing PI, and I've talked to a couple different practitioners, and I've noticed that some do a very strict, like, initially we're going to talk to you about coming in 3 times a week, then 2 times a week, then 1 time a week, essentially for the next 3 months or so. But then I've also talked to others who generally, and obviously you're going to vary it per patient, but we tend to have, something that's kind of a template in our head, and then we change accordingly. I've talked to other practitioners who say, how important it is to do like every day for a couple weeks. Do you guys have any advice about, how to change that, and, what would maybe flag you as going, okay, well, changing that up, especially if it's every day? I've never had a case where I would do every day, even somebody who was severe, but if you guys have any advice about that, I'd appreciate it.
What we've done is, it depends too what day of the week it is too. It's like sometimes it's on a Monday. It's real easy just to see everybody that first week, every day. And, again, you have to explain to them that report of findings, which is your key. The report of findings is the key to explain, okay, Mr. Jones, here's what we got going on. It's going to be very important that you keep your appointments. And, because then they'll ask, well, how long do you think this will take? We have no idea. You can give a ballpark 3 months, 4 months. If you don't really want to be pigeonholed, you just say, we're going to reevaluate you after 12 visits or even after 6 visits, because that's when we're going to do the MRI. That's when we're going to refer for that MRI, and then at least they can see that you're on top of it that way. And as they, hopefully improve, each case is different. So to pinpoint it, 3 times a week for 4 weeks is kind of at least nice to at least start. And then, but you're not going to get, pinged that you're going to overtreat, especially if you have true diagnostic findings.
I'll say, this is maybe just my opinion, but if you're treating a personal injury patient for 3 months, you should not be the only provider who's treating that personal injury patient.
That is true too. Yes, absolutely.
See somebody else for, an evaluation, whether it's pain management or a neurosurgeon or even just an orthopedic surgeon. You've got to be making those referrals, and you've got to be unafraid to make those referrals. To me, one of the most frustrating with some of the cases we've seen is where we'll have a case that comes into us from a chiropractor, and we see this chiropractor's been treating this patient for 6 months since the car wreck, and never made a referral to anybody else. And the reality is, unless you got that confirmation from another provider who says, continue with conservative care, here are the issues that are identified. If you're just getting chiropractic care for a prolonged period of time like that, insurance companies aren't going to pay for it. And you're going to be fighting a very steep uphill battle on that from the lawyer's perspective. It's just, you can't just sit on these cases and take care of them completely yourself, or a prolonged plan like that. And if, the reality is the person needs 3 weeks of chiropractic care and then they're completely back to 100%, well, okay, then it's that kind of case. But if you're going to treat somebody for 6 months and not be making those referrals, it really damages the case.
Yeah. In the old days, when I first started 30 plus years ago, that's what we kind of did, and again, the insurance game, for lack of a better word, was different. But now, in the last 8 to 10 years, 12 years, and having things like this and having meetings and meeting other docs and meeting, now that the chiropractic and the attorneys are working together, and the MRI, the pain management, or whatever else it might be, a wrist that doesn't heal, an elbow, a shoulder, getting these patients to these various practitioners it's important for the patient, and it shows the patient that you do, you're on top of things. But B, it's a driver for the case to help the patient get the best possible ending scenario and settlement that they can.
I have a question. I guess it's probably maybe more so for Ken, but whenever you come to the end of a case and you're wrapping up and you do your final assessment, sometimes patients, like you'll originally code them like M5, 0.10 cervical radiculopathy, but towards the end of their case, the radiculopathy might have resolved. Now, do you then prefer, especially whenever you go into the insurance company with all the different diagnosis codes, do you prefer the doctor then to amend the diagnosis code to a more general one, like just cervical disc issue, or do you keep the original diagnosis and then just add additional ones to reflect just general disc involvement?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want you to revise your initial diagnosis to reflect the patient's improved condition at the end of the case. I guess what I'm saying is, so at the beginning you might have that code, and then at the end, like in your final diagnosis list, do you prefer that stay as part of like the huge diagnosis list, or do you prefer that be removed and then amended? Not like you're not changing original notes, but at the end you might have M50.80 instead of the radiculopathy code that you used originally. I'm not sure for me that it matters that much. It's in there originally, and I'm going to draw attention to the fact that there's a radiculopathy diagnosis, and then we'll discuss it however the facts of the particular case require. If the radiculopathy is ongoing, and that's one piece. The radiculopathy is resolved. We'll talk about the the problem for however long it existed and whatever potential future implications it has.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I've heard from different practitioners, like some people, kind of remove it from the diagnosis list at the end, and some people leave it. So I just didn't, I just kind of wanted to hear people's feedback on that.
I mean, either way, it's going to end up in my list. I don't know. I don't have enough data to say one way is better than the other.
Okay.
Well, it's also important too to remember once you do get that MRI diagnosis to put it in, because sometimes you forget. You're 3 weeks down the road, and I was like, oh gosh, I got an L5 herniation, or this protrusion, and you put the code in there. Just add the code. You can keep them. We've just kept them in the past. Keep all the codes. You can put some things that are resolved, or depending on your software too, and say that condition was resolved.
There's nobody here who does exclusively handwritten records, right? Anybody?
Not anymore.
Well, you'd be surprised. I gotten a few recently where we requested medical records from the chiros, and they come back and there's no ICD codes. Everything's handwritten, just little forms filled out, checked, boxes checked. I get it. There are a lot of people who are just not set up to do personal injury. They're just trying to provide good chiropractic care, and but it is very important that we get everything with modern codes. The ICDs and CPTs match the ICDs, and there's a lot of expertise that has to go into that. So rely on you all to have that expertise.
Out of curiosity, and this is kind of going into what you just said, Dr. Martini, about the diagnoses, and that I had a patient recently who had, he had all kinds of imaging before even coming into the office when he started care. And all of those imaging had maybe 4 or 5 diagnosis codes in each of them. Would you say that, he had things like fractures, sprains, strains, disc issues, et cetera. And then that's not even including my analysis as a chiropractor and looking for things you know, with radiculopathy, et cetera, et cetera. So how would you put those in there?
Are these basically pre-existing conditions?
No, all from the same accident, like a very serious accident where the patient has several fractures, several disc issues, several, et cetera, you know, all of these things. And as we know, our ICD-10 codes are very specific. So you can't just, you know, it's very hard to put just one, you know, oh, he has a disc issue. Well, he has 4 disc issues, you know? So I'm just kind of curious how you would determine, you know, would you try to prioritize more of the fractures? Would you prioritize things more related to the chief complaints then, or?
I think if your software is set up where there's places where you can do an addendum or you can do a story, and you write it all, just type it in so that your SOAP note will reflect that. Not so much the ICD or the HCFA form, but you know, you just put them all in. And again, you know, if there's a way that your software can tell a story, or maybe you don't want to put them all in, I would put them all in. If you have them and they're diagnosed on X-ray and on MRI, put them all in. It just builds, again, you know, builds the case, it drives the case. And if the patient has it, you want to have the record reflect that they have it. That would be my opinion.
I know I keep asking questions.
Keep asking.
I'm also having, I'm looking for more physical therapists that are in the area that maybe tailor more for PI or are just really good physical therapists. You know, I've seen a couple in the area who, you know, just never like, oh, go do some exercises over there, you know, you'll be fine kind of thing. And they just sort of aren't very specific. They aren't really taking care of what the patient needs. And I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations for people within, you know, north of the perimeter, near the perimeter, of just different physical therapy offices that you would recommend.
I can personally get you some information, you know, afterwards. I will be more than happy to do that, but I can't think of any. I don't have a Rolodex here. And Steve, I'm sure Steve does, of course. There we go.
So where's your office, Allison?
Terrell Mill and Powers Ferry, just in East Cobb. So kind of by the baseball stadium.
Yeah. So are you talking specifically PI or everything?
Both, honestly. I've met some great ones, but they're like in Dallas and stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to send my patients all the way out to Dallas, you know, for physical therapy. So if you know of any that are in the area for PI and for you know, just general referral, I would love that because I have a couple patients who I would need to refer actually soon.
I do. So just take my telephone number down and call me after the webinar, and I'll give you the information.
Yeah, that number's not showing up on there. It's just her name.
Yeah. Could you just say your phone number real quick, Steve? Or Dr.
770-355-2997.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're in trouble now.
I have another question now. Talking about co-management with medical practitioners and everything, do you generally, how do you handle, I mean, kind of going back to the theme of this talk about being the quarterback, how do you coordinate that care with them? How do you get in touch with them? Especially if you maybe haven't already developed a relationship, or maybe you do. Is it something where you're calling to check in with them? Are you...
What we have done, and we are actually going to be adding now with Health Plus medical doctors, which is once we get through this whole pandemic. But in the past, where we've got a couple that we use, and again, sometimes we come back right to the attorney and say, you know, Ken, who do you like to use? Or maybe the patient's not right by your office. Maybe they work, you know, and it's not going to be convenient that way. if you have the relationship, again, usually sometimes they have referral pads, just like the MRI. Sometimes you just have to call and say, hey, we're going to have such and such call you, and give them the heads up, and then let the patient know we've already called over there for you. They're expecting your phone call, and they're close by. That's how we've done it.
How do you handle the co-management though? Like, so, you have an orthopedist who's working on something, you have a physical therapist working on something, and you're working on something. Do you coordinate care?
Yeah, our central office does. Yeah, we try to call up and say, hey, or we'll get the feedback from the patient first. Sometimes the patients rarely, it's like, I didn't know if I liked that office that much. Oh, okay, well then we need to call over there and find out what's going on. Or just, again, call up after the first visit or second visit. Hey, can you send us a report? What's going on? You have to be, they're probably not going to do it. You need to kind of just, again, you got to make the call and call them or ask them or have your office manager call their, hey, can you send over or fax over the reports so you have it, so you know what they've done. Because a lot of times the patients think they got something, or they'll tell you, oh, well, they just did this, and then you get a report and it's like, that's totally different than what the patient got or thought they got, especially when it comes to any kind of an injection or epidural versus a trigger point versus a set injection. They don't know. They just know that you sent the patient. They were sent over there, and they come back and say, yeah, I'm feeling a little better. So yeah, you do need to get that. You have to just be aggressive and do it. Call them up, ask them, send me the report. Some will send the report, right after the visit, but a lot don't.
I mean, you're confident in your ability to care for this patient. You understand the big picture because you're taking the time to actually pay attention to the big picture. And if something that, whatever you might think of in terms of a hierarchy of the medical food chain, where these people think they are on the food chain, if they're not paying attention to the big picture and they're missing something or they're not doing something appropriate, you need to be ready and willing to stand up for your patient and point it out. Criticize or get into a fight with anybody, but just to make sure that your patient is getting the appropriate care and that the issues that need to be addressed are being addressed. I mean, I can't think of a single case I've ever had where the treatment was perfect, the medical was perfect, and everything was perfect. There's always things that need to be done better. And it's sometimes amazing to see how far off the mark treatment can be. And you've got to be willing to go back and say, hey, this was not right. This wasn't done right. It needs to be done differently, or these other things that were missed need to be taken care of. It's a mutual professional relationship between you and the other providers. And you have every right to speak up to add.
And if it doesn't seem to work out, you're probably not going to use them again. And you might want to just tell whoever it is, like, we're not happy. We have business. We'd love to send you people, but if you're not going to do what we ask or what we need, then we're going to go somewhere else. That's where, getting that important to have them come to your office. You go to their office, see if you can get these medical doctors to come to your office at least one time. And then there's the name and the face in the clinic, and they know better. Or even if it's an office manager, invite them over for lunch. Show them your facility. It's important. I think that's about that's all I've got.
All right. Anyone have any other questions or anything else you want to talk about? Is anyone doing anything that you think might be of interest to the other people on this call in the face of this whole COVID-19 mess? Anyone innovating out there?
I'm sorry, Ken, what was the question?
The question was, in the face of all this COVID-19 mess, is anybody doing anything that they think is particularly innovative or something that other people on this call might not have thought of in terms of operating the business or patient care?
We're calling everybody. We're just calling patients, let them, even like patients from 2 and 3 years ago. It's like, hey, how you doing? It's a great excuse to make the phone call. Not that you need to have an excuse. Hey, I haven't talked to you in 6 months or a year, and letting you know we're still out there. Maybe they get your emails, maybe they don't, and just again let them know you're wiping down tables before and after the patient gets it. You're wearing the mask. You're taking the temperatures. You're doing all the things that the CDC is telling you to do, and You know, if they need you, you know, great, come in. If not, wait till after this whole thing passes, great. But let them know that you're there for them. And at least once, twice a day, I'll have somebody come walking in and maybe you haven't seen in 6 months, like, oh, thank God you are open. I am so stressed out and I'm glad you're open. And, you know, they need the care, PI or not. I mean, people just need the care.
You know, early on in this whole thing, we were brainstorming about ways that we could just help people. One of the things we came up with was we built a tool that will allow people to, if they've been putting off doing a will, an advanced directive for healthcare or power of attorney, we built a tool that lets them fill out a questionnaire and generate those 3 documents. And we've just been making it available to people free of charge. So if you know anybody who has been putting off that stuff and is a little bit freaked out by the fact that all this is going on and they don't have those documents in place, they can go to our website and get signed up for this tool. And like I said, it's completely free of charge. We're not charging any fees. We're connecting the people who participate in this with other estate planning attorneys, so they can follow up and just make sure that the documents we prepare are appropriate for them. But you know, anybody who needs their wills redone, and once again, we have a tool available.
Great.
One thing that I realized over this whole thing, we've been open the whole time, taking care of like pretty much anybody, but you know, it's mostly the the acute patients that we have and the ones that really needed the care. But when it comes, you know, my software just came out with a new telemedicine kind of Zoom calling, because, you know, obviously with all this stuff going on, and I use Clara, which is a communication system that's encrypted and all that stuff, and they just came out with their video. But we need to see people, you know, pretty close up and hands-on as far as like when it comes to the chiropractic. And I realize I do have other areas in my business where we make money. We do really well with the essential oils. I also own a weight loss business, and how easy it was to send an email out through your system, through MailChimp, you know, talking about when you do weight loss or cleansing or anything like that, how it's very rarely do we have the time to do that and have the time to actually relax and sit home and not have to go through life while we're trying to cleanse and stuff. And we did really well, and it was kind of simple to send an email, have the communication things in place, and just mail out their products or deliver them to the house. Or I'm taking care of a lady right now who's in, you know, California. But just, is there what anybody else on the phone call that is there anything else that they do that would benefit our business at times like this, that aren't businesses that are, you know, face-to-face, close contact, things that people may not be wanting to go out right now because of the quarantine? I found the weight loss was good, the oils were good, but it was nice to have income during this time to come in that didn't really come out of my chiropractic services, let's say. Anything else out there that you guys have noticed?
You're doing the right thing, David, because we do the same thing now with, you know, I'm with Dr. Joe Esposito now in Health Plus Wellness. And again, emailing all the patients, letting them know about all his different supplements, you know, whole food, you know, plant-based, you know, organic supplements that he has, you know, we have available now. We have it in our office too. So we're letting patients know that too, that, you know, you can call in or they can stop by. We've got probably once, twice a week, somebody just walks into our office who I heard you're selling the vitamins here. You have the products here. So that's a smart thing. Yeah. Just letting them know whether they want to come out or not, or you can deliver or you can ship. So that's a great idea. That's it.
All right. Well, everybody, we're going to have another one of these on June 23rd. Dr. Arnold Weil is going to be our speaker. He's going to be talking about treating pain past MMI. Should be a really interesting topic. Something that I'm sure we can all make use of, both with our personal injury cases and even with patients who are not PI cases. If anyone has anything else, that would be a good time. Anybody? Well, I want to thank you all for coming. I hope this was worthwhile. Dr. Martini, this was useful information. I appreciate it. I'm sure it's going to help us all.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Well, I'm
Thank
glad
you.
you help us all improve the way we handle our personal injury cases. So anyway, it was good to see all of your faces, those of you who were able to join. Hope you're all well, and we will see you in, I guess, just a few weeks, about 4 weeks. We have our next lunch and learn. So y'all take care and let us know if we can do anything for you.
Thanks, Ken.